Hi, Jonathan.
Hello.
How are you?
Well.
Good. So when I had you on last time, you said what you hoped to get from this book, because this is the first time you've written a book like this, that you hoped that it would start a conversation. And I think you've done it very successfully. A lot of people are talking about this. Are you happy with what's happening?
Yeah, I'm very happy because readers' responses have been similar to my responses when I was writing the book. I met someone the other day who said, oh, I read your book, Eating Animals. I read in bed with my husband at night. And every page, I found myself turning to him and saying, I can't believe this. You've got to read this. And we have to eat differently. And as I was researching the book, not a day passed when I didn't learn something that made me say, this is insane. This is crazy. So the nice thing about this subject is that, in fact, when we are exposed to the facts, we really all agree.
Right. And I think that's the hardest part, is getting people to start opening their mind to the facts and to look at stuff that they don't want to look at. And you've been all around the world. You just came back from Italy, right? You've spoken to 200 audiences. And what is the reaction for the most part, or is it unanimous?
Well, if you were to ask people, do you think it's right or wrong to eat animals? Most people in our world will say yes, it's right. If you ask people, is it right to have a farm system that we know is making our antibiotics less effective? Drugs that we need, drugs that our kids need, nobody wants that. If you say, is it right to have a farm system that we know, as a rule, is destroying our environment? The United Nations said it's one of the top 2 or 3 causes of every significant environmental problem in the world. Nobody wants that. And nobody, I don't care how much or how little you care about animals, nobody wants to keep pregnant animals in little cages for the duration of their pregnancies. So what I have always thought, and it's been demonstrated to some extent in audiences that I've been able to interact with, is that if we found a good way of talking about this that wasn't accusatory, that wasn't wagging a finger, that wasn't saying, I'm better than you, if we just talked about the facts of the matter, people would agree this is not what we want.
And we've talked about this, but you started writing this book because you had a child and decided you wanted to look into making sure you were feeding your child well. And so when people worry about the amount of protein and worry about stuff like that, what do you say to people?
I'm a dad first. That is my first identity. It's before I'm a writer. It's before I am a vegetarian. It's before I am of any political party. It's before I'm an American. I'm a dad first. And there's nothing more important to me than my child's health. So when I was writing this book, the first stop I made was to nutritionists, to not vegetarian nutritionists, but the most reputable nutritionists in the country. And I went to the literature, what the American Dietetic Association has to say, World Health Organization. And you cannot find a reputable nutritionist, somebody who isn't, basically being paid to have a different opinion, who will say that it isn't at least as healthy to eat as a vegetarian. I mean, we know definitively that vegetarians live longer, and if that's not what we mean by healthfulness, it's hard to understand what we would be talking about.
Right. And also, it's interesting because not one factory farm has come after you, not one person. You'd think if you write a book like this, somebody would be, hey, you got it all wrong, but not one person has spoken up.
Well, if I wrote a book about you, and I said Ellen is bad, and we need to spend less time with Ellen for all of these reasons, you would stand up for yourself. You'd say, no, I'm not bad. In fact, here are all the good things about Ellen, and you got these facts wrong, and there's another way of looking at it.
Well, I'd have someone do it. I wouldn't do it, but I would.
And I wouldn't make the case against you. But I was very surprised by the silence that this book was met with. And it says one of two things. Either every fact, I have about 70 pages of footnotes in the book, all of them are correct and unassailable, or they don't want this conversation to expand for the reasons that I was saying at the beginning. The more people talk about this and the more they think about it, the less inclined they will be to eat factory farm products.
Right. And why do you think it is? Because, when you start talking about this, for the most part, people who aren't vegetarians stiffen up and get defensive and say, and just immediately feel like you're on the attack when you open up this conversation. What do you think that is?
I think the word vegetarian has done a real disservice to the conversation because it implies either you never ever eat meat or you're somebody who simply doesn't care and you're going to eat meat all the time, when in fact, most Americans fall into this great middle of the spectrum. And I wish we could talk about it in a way that was similar to how we talk about the environment. Nobody says anymore, are you an environmentalist or not? I don't leave my car idling in the driveway. I turn off lights when I leave a room, but I flew here from New York, and flying on a plane is about the worst thing you can do in terms of transportation. But I didn't get off the plane and throw my hands up in the air and say, now I'm going to leave the car idling and now I'm going to leave the lights on. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I said I'm a human being, and human beings cannot live perfectly consistently. And we need to think about food that way, that if we could just make steps in the good direction, that's a very powerful thing. If all Americans removed 1 serving of meat from their diets in a week, it would be the equivalent of taking 5 million cars off the road. I believe people, I respect people, I understand people who say, I'm not going to become a vegetarian tomorrow. Someone who says I can't remove 1 serving of meat a week, I have a very hard time understanding.
That's pretty amazing. The equivalent of taking 5 million cars off the road, but if everyone did it, not if some people. Everyone.
If one person ate 5 million, 300 million servings himself, I suppose that would make up for everybody else.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, our country eats a lot of meat. A lot of meat. I think it is this misconception about protein, that we have to have so much protein.
It's a misconception about what food is.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't until the last 30 years that we started eating like this. We eat twice as much animal protein as Europe does. We eat 180 times as much chicken as we did just 80 years ago. It's crazy, and it's not because we want it. It's not because it's so delicious. It's not because it serves all of these very valuable cultural functions. Sometimes maybe it does, a Thanksgiving turkey or Christmas ham, but not the hamburger you get at a drive-thru, not the bologna sandwich you pick up in an airport. And that's what we need to get rid of first. When you're thinking about what are the steps I could take, just start with the meals that don't even matter to you.
Right. All right, when we come back, we're going to hear from some viewers whose lives have changed after seeing Jonathan on the show last time. We'll be right back. All right, well, we have been talking to Jonathan Safran Foer about his book. It's called Eating Animals, and after his last appearance on our show, many of our viewers were deeply affected. Take a look.
Dear Ellen, I was diagnosed in 2006 with a very aggressive form of breast cancer. I saw the show with Jonathan, ordered his book, and read it. I now consider myself a reformed eater. Even though I went through all the traditional treatments, chemo, mastectomy, and radiation, surprisingly, none of that changed my eating habits until I read this book. Not only do I feel great, but I've also lost 15 pounds and have never felt better. I'm convinced I'm doing more for my health by cutting out meat than anything I've done since my diagnosis. Without your show, I would not have read Jonathan's book. It's been such a positive influence on my life. Sincerely, Nancy.
I started questioning my diet because of you and the way you always talk about being a vegan. Like you, I'm a huge animal lover. So when I saw Jonathan on the show, it further reinforced my belief that I needed to change the way I eat. It's been a challenging process, but I'm slowly weaning myself off animal products, and I feel healthier, happier, and better about myself every day. You've inspired me to be the best version of myself. Love, Leah Burke.
Watching Jonathan talk about eating animals on your show was a huge awakening moment for me. Growing up in rural Pennsylvania, my dad ran a deer processing business, and many unpleasant images flooded back to me as I read his book. Page after page brought me to tears, and I made the decision to stop eating meat. Sincerely, John Schlimm.
My name is Harley Hellman, and I'm 9 years old. After seeing Jonathan Safran Foer on your show, my mom and I decided to read his book together, and we loved it. Now we buy our eggs from my dad's friend's local farm, and we're switching to soy milk. He should make a kid's version of the book, too. I love you, Ellen. Your friend, Harley.
Please welcome Nancy, John, and Leah. All right, so Nancy, I'll start with you. First of all, that's what you hope to do. I do this show, and I hope to make people feel good. I hope to make people laugh, and I hope that they learn something and can make their lives better. That's what I hope. So the fact that you actually got something from this, I really am very happy to hear. What was it that was said that kind of got to you?
Well, this coming November, I'll be a 4-year breast cancer survivor. Thank you. And I had all the traditional things done to me during my treatments. I was cut, I was poisoned, I was radiated, and I was rebuilt. But that still wasn't enough to make me change. And I was watching you, and I could see how passionate you were about Jonathan's book. And I just knew that what I was eating was wrong. And it had contributed to why I had cancer and probably a reoccurrence if that ever came. So I just knew that I had to read it, and I bought it, and Christmas was the last day I ever ate meat.
So and what do you feel since you've, do you
I feel great. I feel great, yeah.
Energetic?
Oh, yeah, energetic. I've lost 16 pounds. I'm, brighter. I just feel brighter in my concentration, and I have more energy for my family, and I just feel Great. I feel great.
That's great. I'm so glad.
Thank you.
All right, and Leah, you saw the show, and also something got to you, and what was it that got to you? Was it the animal thing, or?
It was partly the animal things. I mean, I adopted a dog a year and a half ago and couldn't really look in his face every time I sat down to a plate of chicken, but also just it feels like such an overwhelming topic, and like one person's not going to make a difference, but you know, what Jonathan was just saying about even one meal less a week makes a difference. And
Right.
so how can I not do my part?
Right. And like you said, you're still kind of in the middle of it. You haven't completely committed to it. It's very hard to do, and it does feel overwhelming. But
It is.
the fact that you're taking steps, that's all that you can do.
And I feel so much better already. You know, I'm absolutely committing to
Right.
it.
All right. And John, what was it that got you?
For me, it came down to a single word on page 266 that Jonathan used to describe Thanksgiving turkeys: unloved. That hit me like a ton of bricks. For me, that put an adjective on this entire cause and the entire plight of these animals. You know, no living being, whether it's human or animal, should go through this life unloved. And so I really appreciate that. And as crazy as it sounds, every single day now I send love out to those animals. Because we have to do something, and I appreciate that.
I love that. I do the same thing because I know it's happening every minute of every day. And if I'm on the road and if I see a truck and I don't know what's in it, I think, I send you love.
Yeah.
That's all you can do. You have to send them love.